needs people, competition as well, should be employee. Everyone is could be very healthy, could be very good. Once you spend away yourself, nothing. But I guess the problem once you start mixing up things. As usual. Though they are, highly educated, they know exactly what hurts.
Mr. Robin, Mr. Simon will start?
Yes, I think it's very good. I'll just take the first thing and move in. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can all hear me. And to give a flavour of some of the expertise which the UK has in the fire and security sector. I've been asked just to say a few words on a more overall theme. One of the things I'd like to point out immediately is that, it's one of the things we always say, but the UK is the largest non-Arab investor in Egypt. The UK companies have invested around about $18 billion in Egypt. It was looking to increase. We know of about $7 billion worth of proposed investment over the next 5 to 10 years. Our trade between the two countries is growing nicely. Last year, 2004, the export trade between the UK and Egypt UK exports to Egypt grew by 40%. Egyptian exports to the UK also grew. They grew in the region of 15 to 20%. So overall, the whole balance of trade rose over 30%. To a figure, just in goods, of over $1.2 billion. If you include services as well, we're talking about two-way trade of over $1.5 billion, which makes the UK the 5th or the 6th largest trading partner for Egypt, depending what statistics you use, and unfortunately statistics are never 100% reliable here, or anywhere else come to that. The UK statistics aren't 100% perfect either. One of the things which we've noticed in the last sort of year or so is the increase in business confidence for people in the market, for investors in the market, but also for people looking at Egypt as a potential market, as a potential place for investment. And this has got a lot to do with the new government, the government of His Excellency Dr. Nazif, and some of the very good pro-business measures which they've already taken. Things like simplifying the tariff codes, bringing more pro-business people into the regulatory authorities, reorganising GAFI, lots of things like that, which all have made the difference to the way people feel. I mean, I remember just over a year ago, sitting in a British businessman's meeting, and everybody was really depressed, and they were going, oh well, when the pound hits 10 to the dollar, not if, but when, but now you go to the same meeting and it's all, lots of confidence, there's things being done, there's movement, we can see signs of movement. The problem, of course, is all very well passing these laws, they're all very good. The problem is going to be implementation and changing the mindset within certain parts of Europe. So we're not saying everything is perfect here, we have to be realistic. But as far as we're concerned, the embassy, there are definite signs of improvement within the Egyptian economy, and when British businessmen are coming here, we're seeing more of them coming here to try and find to do business. Finding business to do. They're looking around at the Middle East and they're saying, okay, Egypt is now looking. We've gone, much of our heavy industry over the last few decades has disappeared, and instead we look much more at the industries where we can add value. Manufacturing is still a very vibrant industry, but we're no longer the big, the big shipbuilders and the big steel makers to the same extent we were. But it's the smaller, and it's the more agile and the more export-focused companies which are the best in the world. I have to say that, of course, but I actually do believe that the UK standards are the best. The EU, working within the EU, has helped increase some of the markets for the UK. But that brings me to the next point, which is the association agreement that Egypt has with the EU, which will, I think, prove to be a great boon to the Egyptian economy, gives a whole new opening market there, and greater access and greater ability to get in there, to go into Europe and do business there. And it will also increase the attractiveness of Egypt as a place for people to come and do business. I'd just like to say a couple of words about the companies who are here. They are all leaders in their various fields, but if I could just introduce some people. There's Ben Abbas from Norway. Norway are Europe's largest supplier of CCTV and access control, and they supply to over 80 countries worldwide. Pat Bradley from Millbank. Well, Millbank they do the voice evacuation systems, both the fire and security. They've covered projects from Harrods to oil platforms in the North Sea. And in fact, if ever you go, in control equipment make the control panels for the fire systems. Manufactured in the UK again, but supplied worldwide. Fully up to fully compliant with European standards. It's a very good product. And Robert Edmonds from Hochiki, who's been here a few times now. And Hochiki, despite the name, are a UK company. One of the world's leading fire detection systems, and they've been expanding into Europe and into the Middle East over the last few years. They're committed long-term to markets rather just so they're here for the long haul, see what they can do. And they seem to be doing very nicely. I'd just like to finish by thanking Mr. Magid for inviting me along. I'd just like to wish you all a good seminar. I hope you have a good day today. And I would like to say that this is actually a good sign that we've got British companies coming out to Egypt with the possibilities of doing work, taking advantage of the growth within the economy, the added confidence within the economy, and hopefully they will be able to take from this meeting more opportunities and potential. But I'd just like to, I'm afraid I have to leave now, but I'd like to hand over to Leila Maghrabi. Leila is a very important person in the connections between the UK and Egypt, because she's the executive director and Egyptian businesses, always a good source of information and contacts, and always very, very helpful. And I'd like to hand over to her now. So thank you very much.
ladies and gentlemen, yes. I'm going to speak in English just to make life easy for everyone, yes. Egyptian Business Association, BEBA, B-E-B-A, this is the abbreviation. The British Egyptian Business Association was established nearly 8 years ago, and the main objective and the main goal of this association is to promote business between UK and Egypt at large. This is very important because we found that, as Stephen was just mentioned, it's the biggest investor, non-Arab investors in Egypt so far. They are investing in heavy, assets like the petroleum industries. Big investment actually in Egypt, and it's increasing by time. Let me talk a little bit about our association. We have so far as well 300 corporations, and 30% out of them multinational. Multinational, that means not necessarily with UK, but with Europe as well at large, some of them with Germany. Some of them, like C&T as well, they are working Germany, American and UK as well. We are assisting our members in getting all the opportunities in order to have market in the UK. How? Every month we have business lunch or dinner. This, we gather all our members in order to get along together and to know how can they deal with each other. This is one of the major things that we always have in us. And with a speaker either from the government or from UK, just to address them about a certain topics which is of a main concern for all our business community. The second thing, we have always missions coming, prepare missions coming, especially for our members to come from UK to meet their partners here. And it's according a certain request. Just a few months ago, we have prepared what we call it the residential tourism mission, which we were the first initiator for the residential tourism in Egypt as a new segment for the tourism. Not only the UK citizen can come for a couple of weeks, and this is what we consider, a maximum thing. No, we are offering them now properties in the Red Sea to buy and to purchase, to get mortgage from UK bankers as well and from mortgage companies. So that means we are encouraging the foreign direct investment as well in another segment which is completely new now in Egypt. And the government is supporting this now with a lot of laws and amending. Now it's leasing. You can have a property in the Red Sea for 99 years. It's like UK exactly, with a mortgage from HSBC, Barclays Bank, all these big, bankers in UK. The other thing is we are last year as well, like this year, which this event, a big contract has been signed by a ceramic company in UK and Egyptian counterpart here, and they have now a contract for 5 years to export their products from Egypt under the name of the British company to UK. And this is exactly what we always hope, to get the laborers here to manufacture under branding, a UK branding, and to export again, either to Europe, to UK. Our main objective actually in the coming 5 years is to make Egypt as a hub for Europe and for the Middle East and for Africa as well. We have the labor, we have the consultant, we have the know-how through our partners from UK. So this is our main objective, to encourage the UK partners to come and invest here under this good circumstances here with Dr. Ahmed Nazif under his leadership. And this is a very good opportunity for people like us, like you, just to encourage the best UK consultant and UK brand name to come and invest and see the atmosphere, see everything, environment, which is really suits everyone now. We have around 6 committees now, focusing on certain sectors like the investment, petroleum, industry, textile, agriculture, IT, all these construction as well. All these committees are working very hard and lobbying with the government for the sake of the our business community, to facilitate life for them. Any problem like the taxation, last year we worked very hard with the other association and chambers in order to reach what we have reached today, changing the taxation system and things like that. This is part of the effort of all the associations now working in Egypt as NGOs. I don't want to take much of your time, but I would love very much actually to have you all as members with us, and even as guests to attend some of our events, like with Mr. Magid last year started. He was very active actually member. He's just a new member, started with us last year in 2004, and since then actually he's very effective member, giving us a lot of information to give and to disseminate it to all other our members, and is always active in getting in our business lunches and dinners and missions. And I wish him all the best of luck in all his business and with your great partner here. Yes. Let me just say something about the commerce and the technology group, which really I'm been honored to be invited by you. C&T actually was established in 1993, and it's, as you can see, it's a very new company but very effective and young. This is what we hope from the rest of our actually industries here in Egypt, and is one of the leading companies in Egypt specializing in firefighting and security systems. It is sole agent to an authorized dealer for over 16 companies in the UK, US and Germany. So it's a multinational actually. C&T specializes in the design, supply, installation and maintenance of security and firefighting systems. They have carried out public sector contracts for the Egyptian government, military and police, as well as private sector contracts in the tourism industry, hospitals and education, to name but a few. C&T were selected to be present at the British Embassy Trade Mission to FIREX IFSEC, the International Fire Security Exhibition in Birmingham last year. As active members of the BEBA since 2004, I would like actually to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Magid and his team for inviting us, and I wish you all the best, inshallah, in your business. Thank you.
About the technology my company has to offer, but I will not spend a lot of time on the company background. I think it's not so important to you as to understand what we can do for you. But a few words I must say, and I must say that we are a Japanese sounding company, but we are based in UK. We've been based in UK now for more than 12 years, and we manufacture our products to the European standards, and we also have products to the American standards. We have been supplying to Egypt since almost the beginning with the C&T company, since about 1996 or 1997, I believe, after the company was founded. But we are a proper manufacturing company in Britain, and we have about 85 people. And we've been growing quite steadily, and we look at Egypt as a very important market for us. So we're really committed to it. I'm going to give you a small presentation about the technology, and I make no apologies for the start, which is going to be quite in-depth. So if you're not an electronic engineer, then this is going to be the hardest part. And if you are, this will be easy. And there will be a test later.
Even if you have any background in engineering?
Sorry, you still have to do the test. So, as I promised, it's going to be something more detailed, because I thought if I start with the most difficult thing, then it will keep you awake, and later you can perhaps relax a bit more. I'm going to talk about the protocol, and the protocol in this thing is a specific way. It means the telemetry, it's the transmission system between the products. And when you talk about a fire alarm system, we're talking about a control panel such as these, and sensors, such as these, which are located around the rooms. And yes, you can. The way that it transmits is also very important. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about the communication protocol. We call our protocol ESP. Now, Mr. Mugget has asked me to make some references, some specific references, as to what are the advantages of our products over some of our competitors. Because we all have competitors in this world, and why Hochiki? Why not XYZ? So I made some specific points on the presentation, explaining what the benefits are of ours over the other competitors' product. So first of all, we have a digital transmission, which means that it's exceptionally secure, as you can read from the slide. And that means that we have very strong immunity to any unwanted alarms. So an unwanted alarm is an alarm which happens in the building, and for some reason the fire alarm system seems to say there is a fire. And if it's a fire, that's great. But if it's not a fire, everybody gets very frustrated. And if it happens lots of times, people ignore the fire alarm. So what we're really trying to do is to detect a fire when there is a fire, and to ignore a fire which appears to be a fire unless it's actually a real fire. So false alarms are quite a common word, but they're very important, and we try to remove those. Now the way we do that is we have checksum error detection. I said it was going to be difficult, but we have two ways of checking that the telemetry is secure. And we use checksum, which means that it does give us high immunity to the false alarms. And also, as regard to high alarms, we have strong immunity against electrical noise from mobile telephones, from generators, from motors, from lifts, from elevators. It's a very secure protocol, so we don't get up electrical noise or disturbance. And these all give us the benefit, which translate into high immunity against false alarms. Some more main features with the benefits here. The alarm signals between the sensors or the detectors and the control panels are interrupt processed. They have a priority, a queuing system, so they take the highest priority. Rather than process all the data, if there's a fire alarm, with an interrupt, it means that it tells us this is the most important and we have to deal with that problem. If there's a fire, we want to deal with it now. Some of our competitors don't do that. We use an interrupt system, which means that we can be quicker. The thing about a fire is, it's not usually the flames that kill you, it's normally the smoke. And the way to avoid death in a fire situation is to get the people out of the building as soon as possible. That means you need the earliest notice of when there's a fire. It's no good waiting. People have got to get out. So you have to detect the fire and signal it as soon as possible. Another benefit we have, which is we can have up to 16 sub-addresses on a loop. A loop is the way that we configure the system. We wire all the individual detectors together, they're wired, and we can put a lot of them in a loop. We can put 127 minimum, but we can also put 16 sub-addresses, which means we have a massive expansion. A sub-address means that you can actually put additional devices connected at the same point. And we have up to 16. None of our competitors have 16. But it means that you can put more detectors in a building with less wiring and less control panels, which is lower cost. Another real benefit is that we have sounder synchronization. What we mean by sounder synchronization, if you have a fire alarm and you signal it with an electronic sounder, then in a corridor the sounders will pulse usually. Sometimes they're continuous, but if they're pulsing, then it's very important that they pulse together. That's what I mean by synchronization. If they pulse out of phase, you might misinterpret that signal. You might think it's a continuous signal. You might think it's an on continuous tone because of the echoes or the sound within the building. So we can synchronize them so that they will never be overlapping. Some of our competitors can't do that either. More points on here. It's a programming action, but we can easily find in case you put two detectors at the same place. It's very quick to do that, which means that you can commission the system very quickly. Another advantage is we have 240 different device types. So what is a device type? Well, this is one type of device. This, it looks different, is another type of device. This is another type of device, and there are various others. We have such a range in our software that every individual device, is a different one here, can be identified. Some of our competitors can't do that. They've only got a limited number of device types. That means when the fire is announced, you don't know which type of detector sometimes, or what kind of circuit is causing the alarm. And that means you're not so sure. And what we're saying is we have greater flexibility so we can understand it. And the last one on that slide, we have the expansion capability of 65,535 addresses per loop, which means in the future we can put fire and security and potentially other things on the same loop. So you could have a completely integrated fire and security system. Today most of the fire and security systems are separate. You have the security system, burglar alarm, intruder, access control, and you have a fire system. But we have capability with this telemetry to put up to 65,000, which is a lot.
But security 12 volt only can manage.
No, you can put on the same telemetry
On the
protocol,
same.
it's 24 volts. Yeah. Some of our competitors are now doing that, but not very many of them. The standards are changing, and it is becoming possible now to put fire and security on the same loops. In the past, it wasn't possible for standards reasons to combine them. So what did I mean by check? You remember I said checksum error, you probably forgot about it, but I'm going to remind you now, just in case. Here is a telemetry transmission. It's a digital transmission, so it's a series of zeros and ones, as you can easily understand. And this is a pulse train with various words in it. So this is one data word, just one, and of course it's just diagrammatical. But at the end of all this, what you want to do is to make sure that the right number of ones and zeros are transmitted. And I'm not going to give you a strong lecture about that, but the one way of doing that is to send an extra pulse at the end of the chain to say whether it's a 1 or a 0. And if you add it up, and if it's even parity, if there's enough 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, then this one will be a 1 or a 0, depending. And most people use that. Well, that's quite good, and it's quite standard. The only real difficulty with that is if you get electrical noise, you might lose one of these. Well, that's not a problem. But if you lose two, that's either a 1 or a 0, and it'll either be a 1 or a 0, but it will be a problem, and you might not have got the correct data. So what we do is we have a checksum word. We put another word at the end of it. So not only does it count all the 1s and 0s on there, it also puts another word which gives you another diagrammatic form of it. This is becoming more common now, but it's important. And what I'm trying to show you is the data integrity is high. So it says it's virtually impossible to corrupt and read that data incorrectly. In the past, when I've spoken to this group here, there's been some questions, some rather basic questions, which said, can you explain what we mean by analog? We know what is fire detection, we know what is conventional, but what do you mean by analog? Will you use the word analog? You will use the word digital. So from previous times I've been here, I've remembered that people aren't so clear sometimes about what is analog. So here's a brief explanation about analog. Actually, there's a series of digital steps in any signal here. We digitize it. It's just a moving reaction. And we call that an analog value. But what we actually do is we digitize it. And some of you will say, well, I've got a digital this and a digital that. Digital is better than analog. I understand that. But here we use the word analog. It actually means digital. It's very confusing. But the simple explanation I try to give is it's really a digital system. But it represents the analog quantities. So for example, heat or smoke, whatever is changing, because it changes continuously, it's not easy to send this back as an analog value, so we digitize it and you know precisely what level the signal is at. Precisely. Our detectors are also capable of automatic recalibration. That means as the detector gets older, as the room gets dustier and dirtier, it recalibrates them automatically. What it does is it checks the situation of the detector, what's the clean air condition, and it automatically adjusts the detector so that it remains in its maximum effective state. If it's getting slightly dirty, it readjusts it. That gives it the maximum range. One of the problems of false alarms, the detectors get a little bit dusty and dirty, and it takes less dust, and then they start to think there's a fire. What you need to do is to keep that expansion in maximum. So here's an example of that. If you look over as a graph, this is the amount of smoke or dust or dirt. This is time, probably in days or weeks or years, but generally the detector will slowly start to get dirty because of dust. And that will be, if you keep the level at which it triggers constant, that distance clearly gets less. Which means that if you get a small amount of dust or smoke in there, the likelihood it sees it as a fire. What we do is we recalibrate it regularly, automatically. So that means that the smoke sensor is the same the day it was installed as once it's been left for a long time. These are some of the advantages of the Hochiki. So I hope Mr. Magid has appreciated the effort we spent on that, yes?
Yes, sure.
Very good. Now I'm going to talk something more practically about the analog sensors. I'll talk about some conventional detectors a bit later, but now I'm going to talk about the analog ones. And there are some general points about our detectors which our competitors have, but some of them are still worth repeating. I think there's 3 slides on this one, more than 2 slides on this one. Of course, we're going to say it's leading design, and it is. We say it's full contamination compensation. I've just spoken about that. We have exceptionally low standby current, which means you don't need such heavy-duty batteries or a strong battery charging capacity. We can program them with a digital programmer, which is a very convenient and effective and timely way to program them. We can remove the chamber for maintenance. I'll show you this a bit later on. And we have a clever way to stop them being removed.
Mr. Robin,
Yes.
بعض الشركات المنافسة لينا بيبقى نعمل عنوان للديتكتور وفيزيكال ادريسنج، بحيث ان انا لو اديته رقم مرة واحدة خلاص هيفضل طول ما اقدرش اغير. هنا عندنا ديجيتال ادريسنج، اقدر كل 5 دقايق بعد 10 سنين اغير رقم الادريس. بعض الشركات لما يخرم واحدة منهم خلاص بقت البرمجة ثابتة ما اقدرش اغير. هنا البرمجة ديجيتال، فدي نقطة مهمة جدا لان كتير من الشركات طيب هوتشيكي انجليزي، عندنا 10 شركات انجليزي في مصر وكلها LPCB ابروف. ايه اللي جديد عندك؟ لما كله زي بعضه ليه الديتكتور بتاعك اغلى 10% او 15%؟ طيب ما دي نقط مهمه جدا. انا اديته ادرس وكانت الاوضه دي مخزن مثلا، وبعدين عندنا في مصر نغير بقت مكتب او عايز اغير العنوان خلاص ستارت ما اقدرش اعمل حاجه. هنا لا ديجيتال ادريسنج. نقطه ثانيه حكايه الريكاليبريشن، يمكن احاول اوضحها يمكن بعضنا خد باله او ما خدش باله. غالبا نتيجه الاتربه وخلافه في مصر عندنا بيحصل تراكم للاتربه دي، وعاده ما بنحترمش عقود الصيانه فبتتراكم. فكره الديتكتور ان عباره عن شامبر ماشي فيه سيل من الالكترونات لو كان ايوني او سيل من الفوتونات لو كان ضوئي، فتراكم الاتربه دي بيفضل يكبر ومفيش مينتنانس، فبتبتدي تصطدم بالالكترونات او الفوتونات وهي ماشيه فتعمل فولس الارم. هنا هوتشيكي ما بيحتاجش تنظيف، هنلاقي المينتنانس سهله جدا، ومع ذلك هو اوتوماتيك بيعمل ريكاليبريشن، بيغير الزيرو ليفل اللي بيقيس عليه، فكانه اهمل تراكم الاتربه والاوساخ دي. فدي نقط مهمه جدا لان دايما الشاريين والعملاء والموزعين ليه انت اغلى؟ ايه الفرق؟ كله انجليزي؟ لا. فهنا مستر روبن انا اكدت عليه، اكد ايه الفرق بيننا وبين المنافسين، ونبتدي نقرا الكتالوج لما يكون عندي عروض منافسه وعروض ثانيه ايه الفرق. طيب وريني. ادي فروق كتيره جدا وانا بحاول الخص بالعربي لان احنا بقالنا 8 سنين معاهم ورايحين جايين على انجلترا، فبحاول اوضح بعض النقط. سوري مستر روبن فور ذس but to stress on some points.
Yes. Oh, that's a good point, and thank you for that. I will cover that in one slide a little bit later. We'll talk about different types of smoke and how we minimise the possibility of false alarms. Cigarette smoke is one of those. I will explain that. Thank you for that question. The answer is yes, we can do.
If we have heavy smokers in some area or some room, can we make something?
Yes, you can adjust the sensitivity of the devices.
Feed adjustable?
You can adjust from the control panel.
Control panel.
Yes. And it's quite normal to do that. It's exactly what the reason to make them adjustable. That's right. Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of these, and some of these are very technical terms, but you'll understand them. For the optical sensor, which is now the most common sensor, excuse me, the most common sensor, the optical smoke sensor, it needs to be checked regularly, electronically, automatically, that it's clean inside. And so we have a monitoring circuit inside of ours. It's checking all the time that the lens is clean and that there's no dust inside. It's necessary to do that to make sure that it's working at the best situation. We have a full selection of sensors. There's 4 of them shown there. All of our sensors have 2 lights on them, so that when you fix them on the ceiling, if there's a fire and you come into the room, you'll see one of the lights reasonably easily. Some of our competitors only have 1 light, but we are having 2 lights. So it doesn't matter, if you're an installer, it doesn't matter how you put them on the ceiling. And it's slightly more expensive, but it's not that much more expensive. But it's important for people to see. So we have 2 lights.
دي أول شركة تعمل دول لايت ايميتنج لايت، بحيث أبقى أنا شايف الديتكتور من جميع الاتجاهات. حتى دايما بعض الاستشاريين دلوقتي ابتدى يقول لك الدول ليد الديتكتور. تفرق مع إنها لمبة صغيرة، لكن هتسهل عليا الاطلاع عليه من أي زاوية ومن أي اتجاه.
We spoke about the sensitivity.
This is not good, of course.
Well,
Single LED.
it only has 1 LED on this side, this one, so, and actually this one is not installed correctly. Normally you should see that light when you come in from the door, which I assume would be that door. So if there was a fire in here, and fireman was coming in trying to find it, that base or that detector should be rotated so that the light can be seen. And people don't realise that. But if you put 2 lights on there, then it's not so difficult, because one of the lights will be seen. But it's a question of installation. Yep.
A few years ago, a big fire happened here. The Sheraton, you know that?
Yes, I know.
Yes, yeah. It's because at that time your equipment wasn't here. So it's an opportunity now, I mean, just... I'm not joking, really.
No,
I mean, yes. Hotels, I mean, we are building every year at least 60 hotels over Egypt. And they are big chains, I mean, and the Red Sea, and many areas, and
Sharm el-Sheikh
and the West Coast as well, big projects, I mean, and all of them, they are looking for such a very sophisticated system.
You know, life safety can't be overstressed, and certainly we don't overstress it with the security safety side. But with the travel agents nowadays, they are putting the people in the hotels, and hotels are dangerous places because there are closed rooms and people are sleeping there, and therefore you should protect them. Obviously they should have clean water and, you know, room security as well, but fire safety is very important. So a modern fire alarm system will make sure that if there is a fire, people can escape from the building quickly. It's the time that's usually the problem. And people should, in fact the British travel agents and many of the other travel agents nowadays, they won't put their customers in hotels unless they've got a high standard fire alarm system. They will go to another hotel. So it's a big incentive for the hotel owners to put such systems in there. Yeah, thank you. Okay, we spoke about the fine adjustment to the sensitivity. We can do that, and that's working. And electronics free basis is a technical point. It's basically to allow the installers to test the system, and it's very easy to do that before you put the detectors in. And we can do that. Some others can't do that, but quite a few can, but we can do that as well. I'm going to talk about the technology a little bit more, and one of the important points the lady mentioned is how the fire detector reacts to different types of fires. If you're a consultant, as I think some of you may be, or an architect, when you design your building, you want to be sure that no matter what is the materials in the room, the fire alarm system will detect a fire. And you may not know this so well, but there are very different characteristics to the type of smoke from different types of materials. For example, wood, dry wood, burns very differently to damp wood. Different types of wood are also different. But if you took a man-made materials, nylon or carpet or these things, then they also behave differently. And they give a different type of smoke off. You probably have imagination of dark smoke and black smoke and thick smoke, and you will recognize that that type of smoke is different. And then the question for the consultant is, which fire detector do I put in that room? And that's not an easy answer to give. But the best answer to give is one that reacts to all types of fires. If it's a cotton fire, Egyptian cotton, or if it's a carpet moquette, or if it's wood on the panels, or ceiling tiles, which is polystyrene, you should have a fire detector which allows for that. Sometimes the room will change. Sometimes this room is a banquet room, another time it might be a demonstration room with different materials in it. You can't change the fire alarm system just because the room changes. Not logical. So what we try to do is to make one type of detector which works with all types of fires. And this is a very important point. So that is our basic idea. We have one type of detector which works with all types of fires. It's quite difficult. It's not easy to do that. Everybody recognizes it's not easy to do that. Here's a small explanation about that. Here on this graph we have different types of fires. There are 6 categories there. TF1 stands for Test Fire 1. 2 is Test Fire 2, etc., etc. And on this scale here we have sensitivity. This is smoke sensitivity. We're talking about smoke fires. It's usually the smoke that kills people. So technically what we're doing is we're looking at 6 different types of wood, cotton, plastic, heptane, ethyl alcohol, and how they burn and how the impact of them is on the detectors. There's actually 6 different categories there. I could put cigarette smoke as well, but I'll come to that in a later slide. And what we're trying to do, and this is, by the way, this is dry wood. I haven't got space on the slide to write it. That's dry wood burning in an open atmosphere, so with a lot of oxygen. So that wood, actually, that flame there, that will give a very yellow flame, typically. If you've ever burned wood, or you've seen wood burn like a match, that will burn with a yellow flame. And if you think about it, there isn't very much smoke usually, just a small amount of smoke. But at least it's a yellow flame and a small amount of smoke. This one is either wet wood or very damp wood. And if you've ever seen damp wood burn, it gives a lot of steam off, but it actually gives a lot of white smoke off, what we say white smoke. And it's a different type of smoke. And it's different characteristics, it's different density. It's the same material, but it's a different density. Cotton, well, cotton actually burns with a different, it's a material, it's a fibrous material, so it burns with a different smoke. Plastic, if you've ever seen a tyre burn or something plastic, ballpoint pen or something, it burns with quite a thick, acrid, black smoke. It's horrible smoke, it's quite carcinogenic as well, but it's thick black smoke. Heptane, this burns with a relatively clear blue flame and no smoke. So gas typically is like that, gas sort of fire. And alcohol fires, they burn with another type of smoke. So these are common things which burn. If you think of most things, furniture, carpets, ceiling tiles, wood, they will burn with these categories. And they're not my categories. They're not Hochiki's categories. These are international categories. They're tested, the detectors are tested according to these categories all over the world. And they're standard categories. Certain amount of wood, certain amount of air, certain size room, and they're tested. It's very precise, it's scientific. And they're agreed in America, they're agreed in Britain, these things are absolutely standard. And what I'm doing is just showing you. I'm not setting the categories, I'm telling you this is what they're tested at. So it's independent, and I'm giving you an independent approach on the thing. So those are the 6 categories, and there is a graph. I've joined the dots, I've joined the lines together, but these are various responses for a photoelectric type of smoke detector, a photo, some people know that as an optical, but a photoelectric smoke detector for those types of categories. And you can see that for a wood fire with little smoke, that's like the match burning, it's quite different to a wood fire with thick black smoke, because the black smoke is detected. And you can see the other things, they're not exactly the same. There's quite a range between them. And what that means is, if you have a wood-only fire burning with not much smoke, this photoelectric detector won't detect it quickly. It's not a good detector for that type of fire. And it's also not a good detector for the gas type of fire or the blue flame type of fire, because there's not much smoke. If you think about it, it's a smoke detector, but there isn't much smoke. Therefore it doesn't detect it very well. But it's still a fire. On the second graph now, I've superimposed that. I put the ionisation smoke detector. But the ionisation smoke detector may be known to many of you. Very famous device, invented about 50, nearly 60 years ago now. And that has been the common detector used all over the world. This detector here is an ionisation smoke detector. I know that it has a radioactive chamber in it, and it ionises the air, and it causes some electrical disturbance which you detect inside. And that ionisation smoke detector works very, very well when there's not much smoke, because it detects it quickly. But when there's a lot of smoke, it doesn't work very well, because the smoke blocks the electrical ionisation of the air. So it's almost mirror image. I don't know if you understand me. You know, if you look at them, they're almost opposites. They're not quite opposite, so cotton. But in generally, when one's good, the other one's not so good. So this is a little bit of a problem, because ionisation smoke detector, quite good in open wood fire, not so good in smoky fire. Photoelectric, the opposite. So what's the answer? Do you combine the two of them? Do you have a photoelectric and ionisation combined together? It's possible. Some people have done that. That would give you a balance. It would be a little bit more expensive because you'd have two types of technology, but you'd have a balance. So that's one way of doing it, and some people have done that. Another way of doing it is to put a heat element inside of the detector. If you put a heat element in there, so detecting the temperature as well, if there's a lot of heat in the fire, you can make these more sensitive, or you can adjust them, and you can detect the fire more easily that way. Some people do that. That again adds cost, adds complexity, makes the detector bigger, but it's another way of doing it. It's a lot more expensive. What Hochiki's done is we sat down and we thought long and hard about the physics behind the overall detector chamber and design. And what we've done is we've perfected our chamber. Our detector chamber, the place where the smoke is detected, has been really improved. And this yellow line on here shows the response of the Hochiki detectors against those. And until 5 years ago, our detectors were the same as these other two lines. But now our detectors are like that. Now we call that flat response. Flat response. And we mean flat response because it's behaving almost equally to all types of fires. It's flat. And that's what you really want. Everybody's trying to get there. Ideally it would be perfectly flat. It isn't quite perfectly flat. It's not as good still with heptane, with a gas tank. But it's well beyond the limits of reasonableness on that. And so this technology has been recognised by many consultants and specifiers and architects. So if there's a fire in this room, do I have to use an ionisation? Do I have to use a photoelectric? Should I use a combined one? Use a Hochiki. That's the business.
النقطة دي واضحة عشان دي من أهم النقط في الهوتشيكي.
ده الكومباين
بيجي لي كوتيشن للأسف مع احترامي للمستشارين 90% منهم موصف أيوني. أنا بروح شاطب عليه وكاتب ضوئي يعمل بكفاءة وأداء الضوء الأيوني ولكن بدون مواد مشعة. بعض المستشارين بيزعل أنت ليه غيرت المواصفة؟ ما غيرتش. أنت طالب أيوني عشان يحس بجزيئات الدخان الصغيرة أو يحس بالكيرف بتاع الأيوني. أنا مديلك ضوئي سنسيتيفيتي عاليه ادينا الاداء بتاع الايوني لكن حميتك مش دكتور ضوئي ومغطي السبيكترم كله. ما اقعدش افكر يا ترى الحريقه دي الكحول ولا ترى ده بلاستيك ولا ترى ده خشب جاف او خشب زي ما سمعنا من المحاضره دي اخطر نقطه ومفيش منافس لهوتشيكي خالص في القصه دي خالص. فضروري ناخد بالنا لما اجي اشتري او اجي اوصف القصه دي نقطه مهمه جدا. فلات ريسبونس كيرف حتى الحمد لله بعض السنين دلوقتي يقول لك فلات ريسبونس سموك ديتكتور. نقصد فلات ريسبونس ان بيحس بالدخان حسب بدون يعني الرجوع لاي نوع من انواع الحريقه. ما اشتري دماغي واوصف فلات ريسبونس كده.
من زمان. طب دلوقتي بقى
عندنا
دلوقتي كم سنه يعني؟
ريسبونس تايم مستر.
Yes.
He is asking about the response. Is it fast, slow?
Second.
Yes, there is a requirement. It's in the standards that if a certain amount of smoke is introduced into the chamber, it should respond. And all of the detectors which are LPCB approved or NFPA UL listed, then they have to meet the standards. And the standard is, what they do actually, is they test with a fire, with a ring of detectors a certain radius away, like that, and they all have to react within, because it depends on the distance of the detector from the fire. But all of the LPCB approved detectors, all of them have to meet that minimum. And some of them are better than others. Some of them react slightly quicker. But there is no minimum requirement. And that's fixed by the standard. That's not fixed by Hochiki. Reacting quicker isn't better. They've all got to come into alarm repeatedly, regularly, within the right amount. If you buy EN54, and there is about 23 parts of that. EN54 part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. Part 2 is for control panels, part 4 is for power supplies, part 3 is for, I think, call points, push buttons, part 5 is for heat detectors, part 7 is for smoke detectors. It's a European standard across Europe. You can buy that from the standards office. It's a publicly available document. And all the detectors and fire alarm systems, which is in Europe, have to comply with that.
It is like BS or like NFPA or different?
Yeah, the British standard was one of the founding members, if you like, or one of the component parts of them. So if you're familiar with the British standard is BS 5839. BS 5839, British Standard 5839. That is the code of practice for fire alarm systems. There is a very clear standard on that. But the European norm, EN54, is based on that. And BS is now becoming replaced by EN, because Britain is part of Europe. And the European standard is taking priority over the British and the individual member state standards.
احنا متعودين دايما كاستشاريين في مصر عندنا NFPA 72 للفاير الارم او BS 5839 والوقت نتيجه الاتحاد الاوروبي في EN 54 EN 54 تقريبا الثلاث مواصفات يعني 99% شبه بعض مفيش قلق بس هو نتيجه الاتحاد الاوروبي بقى دلوقتي EN 54.
Okay. Now the lady asked a good question. This is the slide I wanted to talk about. When you think about the various burning materials, one of the ways to look at it is to not only the material, which is the chemical material, but also the size of the material. And in smoke detection, the size of the material, the particle size, is quite important. You probably can't see that very well, so I'll have to read it out to you. But effectively, this is the size of the particle, the size of the smoke particle. This is large, it's the other way around to what you might normally think. But this is the larger size particles, and this is the smaller size particles. So it actually gets bigger in that direction. And what we've done diagrammatically is represented different types of burning materials, the size of the smoke particles when they're there. And so common burning materials, some of them less common than others, magnesium oxide, zinc oxide smoke, burning pigment smoke like paints, for example, that has a particle size, black carbon smoke, something with an awful lot of carbon in it, pine resin smoke, so wood, certain types of furniture have pine in it, pine resin. Cigarette smoke is here, as the lady asked. Wood smoke and cigarette smoke are different. They are different. You might think they're the same. They're not the same. There's other chemical constituents of cigarettes. Of course, there's nicotine and tar, but other than that, there is an overlap, of course. But clearly they are different. They are different. And what I'm showing you on the top two here, and you can't see that, apologies for that, I'll ask Mr. Maggie to distribute a presentation copy later. This says typical ionization smoke detector. And this says existing typical optical or photoelectric smoke detector. And you can see if you look at these two different types of technology, they're both good and they cover most of them. And there's a small overlap in the middle. But actually, you can't detect all of the different types of burning material unless you have the capability of the range of the chamber. So first of all, I want to say, we want to detect all types of burning material. All types. So the Hochiki detector, the photoelectric smoke detector, can reach almost all of them. It doesn't quite cover the range of the ionization, as I mentioned before. This is real data. It doesn't quite. If you look, it's just slightly outside, but the vast majority is within the range. So this type of detector is better than an optical and better than an ionization, apart from a small amount there, a very small amount. And that's the first point. But the second point is that by adjusting the sensitivity of the detector, you can not screen out, but you can minimize the impact from various types of smoke. And that's one of the points that Lady mentioned about how can you reduce, the effect of cigarette smoke. And the way you do that is you use a photoelectric smoke detector and you reduce the sensitivity within the limits of the European standard. You reduce the sensitivity so that it will still detect a fire, but it will screen out as much as possible the chance of cigarette smoke.
واضح من الشكل ان الايوني بيحس اكتر الحرايق اكتر، عشان كده الاستشاريين مصرين عليه. المستطيل اللي فوق خالص بتاع هوتشيكي اللي هو برتقالي فاصفر مبين ان الديتكتور بتاع هوتشيكي حاسس بالاثنين الايوني والضوئي بنفس الكفاءه ونفس السرعه. فجزيئات الدخان الصغيره تتحس بالايوني اكتر، جزيئات الدخان الكبيره تتحس بالضوئي اكتر. السبيكترم بتاع هوتشيكي غطى الاثنين، فانا ما اقعدش اوجع دماغي يا ترى ايوني ولا ضوئي. حتى بقالنا من 20 سنه او اكتر كنا نوصف ايوني لكل الغرف الا الحرايق الكهرباء والكابلات عشان بتدي دخان ابيض كثيف، جزيئات دخان كبيره نوصفه ضوئي. النهارده هوتشيكي ريح من القصه دي خالص، فوتو الكتريك، مفيش مواد مشعه، سنسيتيفيتي عاليه، مغطي السبيكترم بتاع الحريق كله، جزيئات صغيره، دخان صغيره او كبيره، في دخان مفيش دخان، مغطي السبيكترم كله. نقطه يمكن يرجع لها بعد شويه بس تبقى واضحه معانا، المالتي سنسور كل الشركات بتحط 3 سنسور فيه، ضوئي وايوني وحراره. وتشيكي يحط كام سنسور؟ 2 بس، ضوئي وحراره، لان الضوئي مغطي الايوني مع الضوء. فدي نقطه مهمه جدا جدا عشان في التوصيف يهمنا، في التركيب يهمنا، في
I'll move on a bit quicker if you don't mind. I'd like to carry on.
We are interested. المصنعين ما بيصنعش الرينج ده او مش بالكواليتي دي، فبيستعمل لوحه كنترول وهم كسياسه عالميه عاملين زي اجريمات وافقوا يتحط عليها براند نيم تاني. فمش عايز اقول اسماء عشان ما نعملش مشاكل، ما حدش يزعل. اللوحه اللي تحت اللي هي CB 200 في شركات كتيره بتستعملها وفي مصر موجوده تحت اسامي تانيه. واللوحه البريسيب برضه في شركه مشهوره جدا في اوروبا وفي امريكا وليها موزع في مصر برضه بيستعمل اللوحه دي لانه ما بيصنعش كونفنشن. ده دليل على كفاءه كنترول ايكويبمنت، بس احنا اليد الاولى والسعر الارخص والوكيل الرئيسي.
Because we supply to many different countries, obviously in Egypt you speak excellent English. In some other parts of the world they want Spanish, they want German, they want Icelandic. So sometimes we supply in different languages. Text on different.
Arabic.
We've never been asked.
Because we are well educated and we are good in English, no problem.
I said that the panel has got a lot of facilities, and most of these facilities are configurable, we call them. So the engineer can choose how he sets the system up, using DIL switches, using menu options to give him all the remote inputs, remote outputs, all kinds of setup modes for the system. Even though it's conventional, it gives you flexibility.
What's meant by remote menu inputs?
It's where
For Vita? This is for Vita? Yeah, okay. For Vita, remote panel?
No. Pizza is a separate connection on the board, actually. It connects to the repeaters. You have, basically from outside the panel, you have an input. There's 4 of them on there. So you can actually send information into the panel from an external source, and you can send information out to an external
Like tools, for example, or tanks,
Yeah.
or a tank or something like that?
Sorry, I talked about one-man test facilities on the CB200 panel, and you have it also on this panel, of course, but you have slightly more choice on this one. Sometimes you might be testing a system and the building is occupied, I went with one of our engineers to learn. I wanted to learn how he tests the system. And so I went along and I was his helper. And I was going and testing the system. He didn't tell me that we could do it with one man, so he tricked me. And it was a 5-story building, so I was going up and down testing everything. But we had the system set so that the bells would ring, and the building was occupied. And the manager of the building was not happy that the bells were ringing. So this was a few years ago. Now we have a facility for the engineer to test the system on its own without taking me. But he can actually have the sounders silent. So he only tests it and sets the system going, resets after a few seconds, and then he can carry on. Or he can just have 2 seconds, so it doesn't sound for a long time, the bells. He also he can concentrate only on the sounders as well, on his own as well, just testing the sounders, not the detectors. The EN54 standard means that we have to have lots of different options. Some markets, some German markets, for example, German-related markets, want one thing. Other markets want the complete opposite. And the EN54 gives you some flexibility. So we have to provide 2 completely different opposite options with the same product. So you might want to, let's see, how do I describe this? In some markets you have to press the silence, when the bells are sounding, you have to press the silence first before you can reset the system. Some places you just want to reset the system, so we have to give you the option. And the engineer can set this up when he's designing the system using dill switches. So you've got 8 dill switch options. So you've got a lot of different options, and you use these to actually set your different resets, your inhibits, or your delays. You have delays on different individual zones. You can set all these up using your dill switch.
Excuse me, about the alarm, silence alarm.
Yeah.
The steps of alarm.
Yeah.
Can the panel, at first the panel is make alarm,
Yeah.
not sound.
Right. Yes.
Okay?
Oh, the buzzer at the panel itself.
The panel
yes.
itself,
Yes.
at first.
Yes.
Then I make a silence for the buzzer of the panel, not the
Right.
shift.
Yes. Silence buzzer. There's a special button.
Yes, the time to the sounder is start after the silence of the sound of the panel. Can control?
I think it's fixed.
Fixed.
Because it's a conventional panel, there's only a limited amount of control.
No,
time-wise.
some customers need to be controlled or to be have a time to can check its faults or
yes,
not.
Yes. You have there's a delay.
Yeah.
You can set a delay of 0 delay, so it sounds immediately. Or if you want to go and investigate first,
Yeah.
is that what you mean?
Yeah.
You can have up to 9 minutes delay, and that is, you set that, yes. This is between 0 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 seconds. Yeah. 9 minutes. Between 0 and 9 minutes.
Yeah.
So if it is a place where you might have a lot of alarms going off, and you can't afford to evacuate all the time when there's nothing wrong, you can actually set it up so that you can have up to 9 minutes before the panel will insist on ringing the bells or ringing the alarms in the building.
Okay. Can I make the panel after when I make the first time the
multi-state alarm.
Yeah.
multi-stage alarm?
Yes, you can. Yes. Only 2, single or 2 stage. You can have it. You can have a single stage,
Yeah.
or you can have 2 stages where you have a certain amount of time, and then it resets, and it's
Not
like
a set,
a
not a
count.
set. No reset.
No, not reset. It sets the. It's like a clock, like a timer. You have a first stage where it's it has to. You go from. If it's set as a two-stage, you give your security guard, for example, the opportunity to investigate. But if you have it as a two-stage, then even if he hasn't come back, then it means there's a problem, and you've got to the maximum time of that, and you gain.
You can just practically, now I have a fire alarm, and the pilot is, and then I have a
investigate
investigate about what I program 2 minutes or 3 minutes before the sounder. But I want after 2 minutes the panel itself is alarm again.
Yes.
Not the sounder.
Right.
Okay. And after this second stage, the program maybe after 2 or 3 minutes the sounder will be. This you mean by 2 stage or I understand. I don't understand what you mean.
هو ده الستيج الاول ان انا بشغل البردر في اللوحه بس صوت اللوحه كل بال بس بشتغل بعد ما اعمل يديني تايم وتبقى دقيقه بعدها بيبتدي الادراس يشتغل
لا هو
ده السكند ستيج.
لا انا بتكلم على السكند. لا انا اقصدش كده. ممكن يكون هو اللي راح ما لقاش فيه او بلد ما راح ما لقاش فيه حاجه فرجع كانت الساوندر ضرب فاحنا عايز يرجع عايز اعمل سكند ستيج للوحه second stage for the panel to alarm itself the panel or the second time alarm for the panel.
ان انا اعمل الطياره تايم الليل لحد 9 دقائق
برضه مش عايز اكتر
يروح ويرجع في اكتر من 9 دقائق.
دي ليها حلول يعني انا باخر خروج الاشاره علشان ما اقدر اروح لابعد مكان وارجع.
انا عندي 9 دقائق
لو رحت وحصل لي حاجه لا قدر الله وقعت المفروض بعد التايم ده اوتوماتيكلي بيطلع الصوت الساوند. لو انا رحت وما قدرت نتيجه للدخان اللي موجود وما قدرتش حاجه رجعت بعمل ريسيت للسيستم يعني رحت لقيت فول صلاه.
ده لو انا زودت المده بقى خليت وقتي
براحتي لكل منطقه ابعد الوقت الكافي ان انا اروح وارجع.
انا بتكلم على الكونسبت هل في حاجه كده
يعني مش حاجه اللي حضرتك تقصدها دي اللي انت ذكرتها بالتفاصيل ده ان انا اروح يطلع لي البازر وبعدين
احنا بقى ننبه الناس لما يسمعوا الاخر ليفل الالارم ده معناه ان هم
احنا عن كنترول سيستم ابو
ان احنا عاملين 3 ليفلز. اول حاجه ان انا بشغل في الجيست روم وبعد كده ثاني ليفل ان انا بشغل في الكوريدور بتاعه ثالث ليفل بعمله في الكويت. هو ده المقصود بيه.
لا مختلف الزمن يعني بعد
طبعا
كذا سنه
تونز
مختلفه وساوند وليفل ساوند مختلف.
ايوه ممكن يبقى بالسنج ممكن يبقى ستيدي ده اللي انا اقصده يعني
ده ممكن
يعني ممكن الساوندر يبقى بالسنج ساوندر at first بعدين يبقى steady
level alarm. We have 3 level alarm by control equipment HV900.
Limitations also within the EN54 standard. They insist that you have to, after a certain amount of time, if the fire hasn't been, or the problem hasn't been resolved, you have to ring the bells, even if the engineer's got, you might be burnt, and he may not be able to come and reset. So the EN54 gives you limitations, and the fact that it's a conventional system also gives you limitations. So. You can have extra little boards to connect to the panel. We call them enhancement boards, and they give you a range of facilities. I won't go into the detail, but they give you an option to connect external equipment to power or to operate other equipment connected to it. This is what we call a preset marine panel. It's a conventional panel and it's based, well it is almost exactly the same as a normal preset conventional panel, but it has certain modifications because it needed to be able to be used in marine environments. And we had it approved several years ago by Lloyd's Register to EMV1 and EMV2. These are 2 levels of environmental standards that Lloyd's use to test. You can have up to 5 levels, and level 5 is the top level of environment, most hazardous, the most exposed, where it's on top of the ship, outside, for all weather. So this panel is not suitable for that. It's suitable for boats, for example, in the driver in the boat where he's got his wheel. So it's indoors, but it's still exposed to more rain and wind and humidity than normally in the building, and it's also exposed to vibration. Obviously, the boat moves on the sea. So we have to apply what we call a lacquer, which is a protection, like a spray to the circuit board to make it more waterproof. And they have what they call battery clamps to hold the batteries, because if the batteries move around, they can get damaged and that can cause a big problem. These are actually very popular panels, actually, for small boats or for certain onshore but marine kind of environments. Again, it's a conventional system for smaller, simple boats, marine approved. Turkey takes a lot of these because they have a very, very big operation in manufacture of ships. Move on to the gas extinguishing panel. This is called the prescient panel, the prescient 2 because it's second generation. And it's based on a conventional panel, but it's specifically for controlling gas extinguishing systems. Particularly popular for controlling computer rooms, where you don't want to damage your computers, and you have facilities in there to delay. You have a manual or automatic delay to let people come out of the room before you release the gas.
also auxiliary zone ممكن تشتغل فاير الارم مع فاير فايتنج، فيها دايما زونه زياده. لو انا حبيت مثلا مبنى فاير فايتنج زي قاعه مؤتمرات او قاعه كمبيوتر، وعندي اوضه ثانيه ما فيهاش فاير فايتنج عايز اركبها عليها، ودي برضه تقريبا اللوحه الوحيده اللي في مصر حسب معلوماتي اللي فيها auxiliary زون للفاير الارم. افترض المشروع اساسا فاير فايتنج، حميت غرفه كمبيوتر مثلا، لكن عندي قاعه جنبها ما فيهاش فاير فايتنج وعايز احميها بنفس النظام، فيبقى الارم مع فايتنج في لوحه واحده. ممكن المهندس احمد بيقول او بس التركيبات ان ممكن اعزل السولنويد فالف من البانل لو انا عايز اعمل تيست او حاجه عشان ما يفجرش الغاز او يطفي، فدي برضه فاسيلتي مهمه جدا.
On gas extinguishing systems, normally you need to have what's called single or double knob, or sometimes people call it cross-loading. Obviously this panel allows for that. You can have a delay to allow people to come out of the particular area you're protecting of no delay at all, up to 8.5 minutes. This is the display on the control panel, and it gives you information about fire, about the extinguishing system specifically, and then it has the controls for the user. For example, it will show you normal detection information about the detection side of the system. If there's a problem in zone 1, problem in zone 2, because there's 2 zones on the panel. You have an auxiliary zone as well, so it gives you information about if there's any fire or fault in the auxiliary zone. And it gives you information about manual release. Gives you information about if the gas has been discharged, whether there's low pressure in the cylinders.
فيها امكانيات كتيره جدا، اوتو مانيوال سويتش. كتير من الشركات لوحات الاطفاء ما فيهاش، لازم احتاج ريموت بانل، فيها اوتو مانيوال سويتش، فيها مانيوال ريليس اللي وراكب الاصفر معاها. بصراحه فيها كل الفاسيلتي. ابورت سويتش موجود، اوتو مانيوال موجود، اوزيلري لامب موجود. عشان كده هي من اغلى اللوحات في مصر. بتراقب الاسطوانه برضه لو في ليكج في اسطوانه الغاز، بتعمل مونيتور عليها.
So you've got all the normal facilities of a simple conventional panel, but you've got, as you say, you've got the additional facilities of holding the timer, and that's a manual operation. You hold the timer to stop the gas being released before you're ready, and you can change it from auto to manual. You can also have a little, what we call a status indicator. If there is, for example, 2 doors on the area you're protecting, so you'll have the main control panel in one area, but if you want to actually do the timer control, timer hold in by another door, then you have just a simple little box that will give you that facility. There's 2 options.
احيانا كتيره بتبقى اللوحه راكبه جوه الغرفه المحميه بالاطفاء، فدي على باب الغرفه من بره اركب الريموت ستيتس بانل لو عايز اعمل ابورت اجهز السيجنال او اعمل مانوال ريليس او اوتو مانوال سويتش، كل المنتجات.
And you can actually have a weatherproof version of that as well. So it needs to be outside.
ممكن تركب مثلا محطه كهرباء وهتركب الريموت دي بره المحطه من بره، فتبقى ويذر بروف.
And this is another piece of equipment that some of our clients use. If they have gas bottles, gas cylinders, and they need to make sure that there is no leakage of the gas, because you don't want the system to be operating and you find that the gas has been leaking for weeks and months. So this is a very plain, simple system. Right at the bottom here, you'll have 2 metal plates with a simple sensor that weighs the gas. It knows how much the cylinder should weigh containing the gas, but if it's leaking, up to when it gets to a certain level, it will indicate on a panel, and there's a little control box that's connected to the gas panel that will actually indicate that there's a problem with leakage and you need to go and investigate. This is good practice because obviously you need to know this before you need to use the system to extinguish.
It's used like that or just the weight?
No, just the weight monitor and then there's a little control box.
For CO2 or for all gas?
You can use it for pretty much all gas cylinders,
For
yeah.
clean agent like FM200, FM13, how can you determine the weight of the cylinder?
Yeah, some of them you can't, if you can't, but yeah, if there's anything, all the standard cylinders actually.
I think it is for standard cylinders, not.
It works out what it should be in standard. You know you have a full cylinder. It weighs X.
بس هو الصوت اشهر في الوينج.
How I can adjust this weight in this sensor? How I told this weight is.
No, you know how much is it supposed to be.
Yeah.
Okay, for this gas or for that gas, it's different. Yeah, but you know that is standard. So that indicates on the little control box, this is the weight. You know that is correct. That is normal. If that actually changes from that more than a certain percentage, it will indicate to the panel.
What means that there is any adjustment for the way to give the signal? That means if I have a different cylinders, then every cylinder has its weights.
Yeah.
Then I must adjust the weight or the contact which will give.
You do that within the little control box that's connected to it.
Adjustment. That means I can use it for any gases.
Depends how the cylinder is located. Maybe
The inclination, if there is any inclination in the cylinder, in the erection.
That will actually indicate a fault. Therefore, you need to go and check it out. But it might be leakage, or it may be saying that the cylinder may not be straight.
maybe not standard. Maybe elevation, not vertical.
Maybe you couldn't use it if it was. You may need to put. And it's supposed to be inclined?
Yeah. Now we depend on the weight. Of the cylinder when it is very.
It affects on the sensitivity of the sensor itself.
If anything, we put the cylinder in the horizontal. The weight, how we can sense the weight in this.
بس عمر ما حبكي باسطوانه
انا بسال احتمال يكون في مكان معين للصوره. لا
يعني اسال ستاندرد انستليشن
في طريقه دي
ماشي كده دلوقتي وانا بس المكان بس اعتقد فنيا ما
مخصوصا للمنزل مش لازم حسب تصميم الاسطوانه نفسه.
الويت نفسه
كان discussed Egyptians are troublemakers, don't worry.
I've never seen cylinders.
You should understand Arabic language.
Yes, I should.
I'll give you course, no problem.
You should take me to some sites where they have cylinders like that. Stand out of the way.
In the computer room for device load, you put the cylinder in the horizontal way.
In that way, I think you need to use another type of monitoring system.
In Egypt, not everything, no
You do
problem.
that, yes.
هنا هتشرح مسز ان ويليامز، انا طلبت منها الراك سيستم ده ما فيش حد بيركبه في مصر خالص، ولكن نظام ممتاز جدا.
As I said to you, we were part of how fire agencies, and they specialised in difficult, hazardous areas where you needed very specialist kind of systems. And probably about 30 years ago, they started to develop the rack system, where you had a unique system for each project. And that is still the way we operate with the rack systems now. So you have plug-in modules, which are they all be the same.
Egyptians are troublemakers, don't worry.
I've never seen cylinders.
You should understand Arabic language.
Yes, I should.
I'll give you course, no problem.
You should take me to some sites where they have cylinders like that. Stand out of the way.
In the computer room for device load, you put the cylinder in the horizontal way.
In that way, I think you need to use another type of monitoring system.
In Egypt, not everything, no
You do
problem.
that, yes.
هنا هتشرح مسز ان ويليامز، انا طلبت منها الراك سيستم ده ما فيش حد بيركبه في مصر خالص، ولكن نظام ممتاز جدا.
As I said to you, we were part of how fire agencies, and they specialised in difficult, hazardous areas where you needed very specialist kind of systems. And probably about 30 years ago, they started to develop the rack system, where you had a unique system for each project. And that is still the way we operate with the rack systems now. So you have plug-in modules, which are may all be the same and may all be different. And you have modules for fire detection, for alarms, for gas detection, for extinguishing, for data transmission, all kinds of, and plant control is quite a popular one as well. So it's very flexible, but it has to be designed for the particular project. Because it's involved in special hazardous environments, you have to have, obviously you have to have approval, and the rack's been approved by the LPCB for many, many years, and also by Lloyd's Register, because this kind of equipment is fitted in offshore and marine hazardous environments.
اللويدز ده اللي هو المارين ابروفل.
So it's a very capable system. So you can actually, as you can see there, you can detect smoke, heat, you can protect turbines, you can operate plant control systems, You can connect to public address systems. You can actually have set off visual alarms for very noisy areas, and many of these power stations are obviously very noisy places. You can connect flame detection equipment, water sprinkler kind of systems, all kinds of systems. And you can have a very large number of modules on one system to protect very, very big sites. We supply them in what we call 19-inch racks. And in gas turbines, you may only want one rack of modules, and that's fitted into the client's end system. But we also supply full cabinets, taller than me, in very large, they're called whittle enclosures, they're very solid enclosures. So it depends on what the client needs, either a small rack or a complete set of racks. And the cabinets are at least IP55 protected sometimes. So we are involved very often in helping our clients to design these systems from scratch. Now obviously the client knows what is required for protecting each area, what is appropriate, but we can actually advise as to what that means in practice for designing the system. So our engineers spend maybe up to 6 months actually helping them to design, do the drawings and design the system. And each rack module is actually controlled by what is called the common control module. That is like the central computer. You have one of those on the rack, and it can be conventional or analog addressable. You can combine conventional and analog addressable modules on the same system. So I'll just give you some, just so you can see some of the modules. This is a loop module, and you can have up to 32 of them connected to a rack. And you can see you can have different sorts of LEDs indicate the status of information in the loop. Or you often have a large number of zone modules on a system. That is a popular module because of the hazardous nature of some of the environments. It's a flammable gas detection module. You can see that you can have 42 of these, so you have quite a big system when you've got 42 modules connected. That's only a very brief indication of what rack systems do. We insist on working very closely with our clients, and we're very careful about who we offer this equipment to, because there's so many variations. So we like to be very much involved in projects, and some of our engineers actually for many years have been going out to projects, say in the Emirates and some of the Gulf states, to work with our clients to actually design the system and continue to add to them. The systems are in place for 10, 20, maybe even 30 years, so they have to be continually supported. So customer support is important to us, and we do a lot of training in-house with our engineers, with our clients' engineers, and as I say, we sometimes go out to different parts of the world to do support and training. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. دلوقتي عندنا كوفي بريك. We didn't make it for Robin, only for دلوقتي الساعة 1:15. ناخد نص ساعة مثلا اللي عايز يصلي، والكوفي بريك بره 1:15 مناسب. نبقى 1:15 مناسب. مناسب 1:15. المفروض أخرنا البرنامج شوية، لكن معلش ان شاء الله كوفي بريك وصلاه ولغايه 1:15 نرجع تاني.
www.morbang.com. On there you can get information on all the manufacturers' products that we represent. So that could be Panasonic, Sony, whoever you want.